Tomorrow's march in London is a reminder of what we're up against in the battle of our values. The organisers, including convicted thugs and racists, are peddling hatred and division.
There is an Arabic saying, "Don't show your real ability too easy, otherwise people will realize you don't actually have much ability at all." The British electoral system is probably the perfect example of that quote. As the governments across Europe collectively move towards conservatism, it also shows that Western capitalism has reached a stage where government has actually lost the ability to change the state quo or plan for the future. There's no serious party building, no material-based theoretical research, no real accountability to the people. Everything becomes political performance, and often an extreme exaggerated one.
I'm an insomniac, I'm an insomniac, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my switch on.
Sometimes voters elect you because they haven't yet seen your incompetent in action. Meanwhile, opposition parties only need to endlessly attack whoever is currently in power.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to answer a question about taking responsibility because he likes to blame everyone else except himself, and so does the Chancellor. We now know that the head of the OBR was forced out for telling the truth, that the Chancellor did not need to raise taxes.
There's an old saying in China, if you are not in the position, don't pretend you understand the politics behind it. Letting ordinary people vote on major political decisions can honestly become political suicide. During Brexit, one of the top Google searches in the UK after the referendum was reportedly, "What is the EU?"
3, 2, 1.
So there it is. The UK has left the European Union. 47 years of history.
So yes, believe in the power of the people, but don't overestimate the wisdom of the people. British politics has now reached a crossroads. The rise of the Reform UK is less the birth of the new political force and more a sign that old system is collapsing. The two-party system maintained stability for over a century, but now it's being shaken by a party built largely on outrage politics. That shows how deeply public trust in mainstream politics has collapsed. But ironically, Reform's UK slogan, freezing immigration, huge tax cuts, sounds more like emotional venting than actual solutions for governing a country.
77% of the British public want cuts to the numbers coming into Britain, and over half the voters want a reduction to near zero. So people are very upset, they're very unhappy, they're seeing the impact on local schools, they're seeing the impact on GP services, they're seeing the impact on housing or the inability of young people to get on the housing ladder. So that's why it's the number one issue. And I think that the reason in this referendum why we have to talk about this is all the while, that, which is a British passport, or should be, but the first two words on it are European Union, that is available to 508 million people. And
Britain's real problems are deindustrialization, the hollowing out of industrial, and the collapse of the public service. Populism cannot solve those problems. If Nigel Farage comes to power, maybe he will flip the table over, but whatever is left on the table will probably still be broken. The success of the Reform UK is less about economies and more about ordinary British people becoming completely disillusioned with how society works. Imagine your neighbor suddenly filling with immigrants who don't work but still receive large government subsidies, while you work exhausting hours just to barely survive. You constantly hear stories about local girls being raped by the immigrants, while the offenders receive nothing more than 200 hours of community service. Your 8-year-old daughters get harassed by the immigrants, and your 10-year-old daughter grabs an axe to protect her sister, only to get suspended from school for hate behavior. You expect the government to solve those problems, but all you hear are endless slogans about diversity and respect, while discussing the criminal race or religion becomes taboo. Otherwise, you risk being charged with the hate speech yourself. Your community is no longer allowed to celebrate traditional holidays like Christmas, and even national flag you once took pride in is now criticized as a hate symbol, while immigrant communities openly celebrate their own traditions. This is, to varying degrees, whether true, exaggerated, or completely false, the version of society that many native white British citizens feel they are living in today. Whether the media saying it's objectively true almost doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that kind of sense-making has already been deeply implanted into people's minds. As rising inflation, job insecurity, the housing crisis, declining NHS service, and large number of illegal migrants into the mix, and you get the current situation. And to be fair, many refugees from Middle East choose to illegally enter Western countries because of the legacy of the Western colonialism and military intervention. But does housing huge number of refugees in hotels actually solving anything? On what base did the British government decide this was the right approach?
So as I was saying, in the UK, illegal migrants who cross the channel are being put up in hotels with 4-poster beds, buffets for breakfast, and your choice of sporting entertainment. These hotels are usually heavily guarded, so no one really knows what goes on inside, but one man has managed to go undercover and get inside and expose what's really happening.
When I thought of the term illegal migrant hotel, I definitely had a far less luxurious accommodation in my mental image. So aside from music for entertainment, there is other provisions as well, like access to multiple different types of sports equipment, including cricket. If you fancy having 10 eggs for your breakfast, take 10 eggs.
What's on the menu? Hash browns, beans, hash browns, salad, eggs, tomatoes.
They are taking the British taxpayer for a ride. There are 32,000 asylum seekers in the UK being put up in 210 hotels, all on the dollar of the British taxpayer, while British families are struggling with a cost of living crisis, struggling with surging energy prices, struggling to keep a roof over their heads. You have
British politicians, honestly, are extraordinarily incompetent. They represent inefficiency, bureaucracy, corruption, and every other negative stereotype imaginable. Compared to the Chinese officials, many British MPs don't come from a background in mathematics, engineering, or technical fields. Most rise through political connections, elite networks, and identity politics. That explains a lot about why massive infrastructure projects in Britain constantly fail. HS2 being the perfect example.
It says HS2 is now going to cost more than £100 billion. You want to know how you spend that much money on a railway? Let's go and have a look and find out. Thank you. This is the Victoria Road crossover box. It's at the heart of a 13-kilometre tunnel under West London.
According to the Western media reports, HS2 could end up costing around £102 billion. Meanwhile, during the Qing dynasty, the old China completed 200 kilometers Beijing to Zhangjiajie Railway in just 4 years for 8 million tons of silvers. Obviously, those two projects ain't directly comparable, but British inability to produce tangible material achievements is still one of its biggest problems. Replacing one prime minister after another won't fix the core issue. This is also a symbol of late-stage capitalism, when capitalism can no longer transfer its internal contradiction outwards through from exploitation or war. Decline and fragmentation become inevitable. In the short term, countries will keep changing leaders and parties to probe the crisis while hiding the deeper contradiction underneath. Those people sit in the position of power, yet they do either abstract ideological construction, non-serious long-term government theory. At the same time, they also fail to carry out concrete economic planning or strategic industrial development. Instead, they spend all day manufacturing pointless political controversies to manipulate personal arrangements and budget allocations. In this kind of political environment, there's no real future for development. That's also why Western politicians rarely have long-term vision. They only focus on the things they can produce short-term results, because they only stay in the office for a few years. When national interests clash with personal political interests, guess which one most politicians choose?
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. That I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Can socialism solve Britain's current problems? Personally, I don't think so. Britain is fundamentally a service and finance economy. Its industrial base has already been hollowed out, and it's run trade deficits. Socialism can reorganize the relations of production, but it cannot magically create real industrial out of thin air. The only realistic path is tightening the belt and slowly rebuilding domestic industrial, just like China once had to do. Of course, that would require the emergence of a very strong leader. Do people have the right to criticize extremism that grows out of survival anxiety? My answer is yes. But if your criticism comes without empathy or any other actual solution, then honestly, you might as well stay quiet. You can sit in a London TV studio wearing a nice suit and condemn Reform UK supporters as ignorant, xenophobic white people. You can cite statistics proving immigrants contribute positively to the economy, or that crime rates are not statistically linked to race. Everything you say might technically be true, but true change requires a strong centralized force.